the jihadist feels that we're the people that take God seriously, we take value seriously, we take honor seriously. Now that it's distorted and wrong, that it's a cult of death, I understand. But they look at the West and they say, right, no one believes anything. In order for us to be able to actually stand for life, to be all in for all life, we need to actually generate a new story of value. We need to generate that which we stand for. We need to stand for life with the same passion that the jihadist stands for death. We need to stand for value with the same passion that the jihadist stands for what we would call anti-life or anti-value. And we need to stand for a world in which no one's outside the circle. So we begin. And I want to just begin by thanking everyone for being here and saying that this is an unimaginably hard moment. And I'm going to ask Krista for you to put into the chat box the message that we send out inviting everyone this week, because I think it's important. Right? And I'm going to begin there, right, in this unimaginably difficult moment. And I want to begin by saying that I'm proud of us. And if you read what we wrote, we live in the best of times. We can read it together in the chat box. It's what we wrote for the invitation this week, right? We live in the best of times. We live in the worst of times. We live in a time between worlds, right? We live in a time between stories. And let's just kind of locate this together, right? We understand after October 7th in Israel more clearly than ever before that our ability to cultivate discernment, our ability to love outrageously within the context of a shared grammar of value, the ability to articulate a story of desire, a story of lines and circles, a new vision of feminine and masculine, a story of the new human and the new humanity, the emergence from Homo sapien to Homo Amor, remains the best hope and the desperate and urgent need of humanity. So I just want to just feel that together. We're at a moment of immense and unimaginable devastation and horror. And we have to articulate this new story in response. Because it's only this new story of value that will raise all boats and transform reality. So we're here today on this Sunday, right, in One Mountain, Many Paths. And we're going to have a huge question and answer session. That's what we're here for. And we've invited, and many, many people have sent in questions, and I spend the morning reading them. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation. You've begun the conversation with the questions, and I'm going to try and respond to the questions. But we're not having an egoic conversation, right? I looked at everyone's questions carefully. Right? If I missed something someone pointed to, I'm delighted. This is not about being right. This is about finding the deepest shared truth that we can find. And so I invited everyone to bring the hardest questions, right? Which challenge everything, right? There's no bad question. There's no question that's off the table, right? That's part of what it means to be Homo Amor. And just understand that there's a series of values that are at play in this invitation that are themselves part of the response to the challenge. That these values that are in play, right, in this invitation are enormously important because it's about how do you have a conversation. And how you have a conversation is everything. Right? We live in a conversational cosmos, quite literally. One of the things we've been working on is this vision rooted in science of the universal love story. And the conversational cosmos means that actually atoms are having conversations in some very real way. and there's a conversation that takes place in the world of matter, the world of life, and in the human world. And how we have a conversation, who we are in a conversation is everything. The Hebrew word for Messiah is another word in the lineage of Solomon for what we're calling Homo Amor. Messiah means the new world, the new human, the new humanity, the new possibility. And the word Messiah, Mashiach, literally means conversation. Literally, it means conversation. That's what the word, right, actually means. And so how we have a conversation is not nothing, right? It's everything, right? It's who we are. And so how did we get here? What should Israel do? What about should we go into Gaza, Israel? Should Israel not go into Gaza? Innocent people, right? Hostages, the world itself being held hostage. Right? Now, how do we engage? Do we forgive? What's the relationship between forgiveness and justice? Right? What are we taking if I was the president, if I was in Gaza, if I was in Israel? How do I respond? And the set of impossibilities here is unimaginable. And so I want to try and handle 5 basic vectors of questions. Okay? So here's the first one. And I'm operating, under the assumption that most of the people here have listened to either the podcast I did with Aubrey or last week's One Mountain or the One Mountain the week before, because there's actually a lot in them. And, there's some of the questions where I got a sense that people had listened really deeply. Other people asked questions which clearly told me they had listened in and out. They weren't actually listening deeply. So this is a place you got to listen deeply. So I'm just inviting everyone so tenderly, so sweetly. We got to stay inside and really just feel this. So here's the first question. One of the things, right, that I've been saying is that, and it's the code for this week. And maybe we can put in the code. The code is, right, Homo Amor, right, this week's code, right? Moral complexity is the sign of Homo Amor. Moral equivalence is the failure of Homo Amor. That's our code, right? Right, moral complexity is the sign of Homo Amor. Moral equivalence is the failure of Homo Amor, okay? So what does that mean? And I want to address a particular vector of questions which I think weren't listening fully carefully, which I totally understand. There's so much to hear. I can barely hear anything, right? I get the confusion. And I just want to say, if you're not confused, you're crazy. You should be confused. We should be confused. We should all be confused. And there's an enormous amount of confusion in this space. There are impossibilities in the space. And so the beginning, the first step in being Homo Amor is to hold the confusion and to lead from the confusion, or to say it slightly more clearly, to lead from the uncertainty together with the certainty. So there's uncertainties here and there's certainties. Does that make sense, everybody? And we have to lead with the uncertainty. We have to lead with the uncertainty. And yet we have to hold the certainties, right? So one of the questions, or everyone, the people that asked this question asked it in different ways, was, right, so if we're Homo Amor, right, and we're saying there's not moral equivalence, right, meaning not all positions are equal here. Does that mean, Mark, you always say everyone's in the circle. Does that mean there are people that are outside of the circle? Some version of that question, okay? Are there people that are outside of the circle? Are there people that have no holy spark? Elena, I think you talked about it in terms of orcs and holy sparks, right? If I remember correctly, right? And are there people here who are now just outside the circle? The orcs are the villainous, evil expressions in Lord of the Rings of Sauron, who is evil, and his assistant Saruman, and they create these orc armies, right? And so what about this idea that everyone's in the circle? So I want to start there. So I want to say this clearly and unequivocally. Everyone's in the circle. When we say there's no moral equivalence, we don't mean that anyone's outside the circle. And this is really important. And in the experience of Homo Amor, everyone's in the circle. And everyone's in the circle means empathos. And empathos means there's pathos, there's feeling, there's empathy, not just mind, but there's empathy, there's feeling, right? I can feel, to the best extent possible, everybody in the story. Empathos. I can feel everyone in the story. And this is why the story is so unbearably painful, there are no orcs in the story. Even if, as a left-wing commentator who's kind of at the center of the human potential movement, Marion said in her post, what Hamas did was pure evil. So this is coming from a person who's, teaching the Course of Miracles, right? And is coming from the deep, kind of left-wing position, right? So Marion says Hamas is pure evil. But that doesn't mean that they're orcs, right? And it's even if Hamas is behaving in a way which is pure evil. And I want to be really clear, friends. When you go into a psychonaut festival and you target civilians, and targeting civilians means, I want to just get real what this means you take men, you cut their cocks off while they're alive as you rape and kill their women. That's what happened. You cut people's heads off. You kill children in front of parents and burn them and kill parents in front of children. You murder a grandmother and film it and upload it to her Facebook page. These are all validated. That's what we're talking about. If we can't call that evil, we're in trouble. So Marianne Williamson, not a right-wing commentator, not a pro-Israel person, Marianne Williamson, who leans all the way to the left, called it pure evil. Robert Kennedy, right, who's holding a certain position in America today, called it pure evil. Which is, it's not a pro-Israel or not a pro-anti-Israel thing. It has nothing to do with pro-Israel, anti-Israel. That's not the conversation here. We just need to be able to kind of say that's evil. So that's one. Having said that, and here's where it gets impossible, that doesn't mean that even the Hamas young man who committed the evil is an orc from Lord of the Rings, from Tolkien. That's actually not his internal experience. Like his internal experience is complicated and painful and also a certain kind of ecstasy. And so we're going to need to understand what that internal experience is. And I want to talk about that today because it's unimaginably important to understand. So we'll get to that. But if the Hamas young man was an orc, meaning an automatic machine, it wouldn't be evil. Evil means you make a set of choices. One. Two is it wouldn't be tragic. It wouldn't be tragic. But the actual experience of the Hamas young man is horrific and tragic. And even when we have no choice but to defend value, right? To defend against the slaughter, the intentional, targeted, brutal, filmed slaughter. And in order to do that, we have to kill. Like America had to engage Germany, and anyone who's in Europe, for example, listening to this call, whether you live in Holland or Belgium or Germany or France, right? It was the Allies' willingness to engage Hitler, which involved bombing Germany, that allows all of us to live today. All of our lives, any freedom we have in our lives is because America and Europe and Great Britain and France, right? Now, it's the Allies did their best. France was conquered, right? The Allies did their best to take on Hitler. And only that willingness to do that created the very fact that we live today in the world that we do. Even then, stay close with me. This is why I didn't want to be in the thread now, because stay close. You got to follow the thread. You got to be willing to place your attention. If you're a lover, just like when you make love, you got to place your attention. So place your attention. Let's be lovers. Let's make love here. Even when the Allied troops had to kill Nazis, you still didn't get to have rallies of jubilation and be excited about it. There's nothing exciting. There's no joy. There's no triumphalist, right? No, it's tragic to have to kill. And even if I'm killing someone, I have no choice but to kill because I'm going to defend my family. I'm going to defend value. I still don't take joy in killing. There's no joy in killing. When I sat with the Dalai Lama in his room in Dharamsala, where he invited me, and we had this moment of very beautiful friendship, and he said to me, we were talking about the tragedy of the world situation on many levels. And he said, people say I pacifist. Haha, no, world army, no pacifist, China. And what he meant was, we talked about it more, is that there is a need as Homo Amor in a world that's not yet liberated. The need of love sometimes requires the use of force. And pacifism stands against Homo Amor, right? Homo Amor would not say, let Nazism triumph and rule Europe. Homo Amor would not say that. I want to be clear about that tenderly, my friends. But Homo Amor wouldn't say that. And at the same time, Homo Amor also wouldn't say that all the German soldiers were orcs. No, it's a tragedy to kill your enemy. Your heart's ripped apart. You know, in the archetypal story of the lineage of Solomon, where we talk about the Egyptians who are represented as, you know, these terrible, vicious taskmasters who enslave and kill. So when the Egyptians in the mythical story of the Exodus, the text in Exodus, in the original biblical story, when the Egyptians drown and the angels go to sing praise, God says, why are you singing when my people are drowning? There's no jubilation. There's no celebration. And my friends, this breaks my heart to say, but to see around the world, right, after we knew the details of the slaughter, to see Harvard students and Stanford students and students from all over Europe and Sydney and London rejoicing. I mean, after knowing the details of the slaughter, to see woke communities rejoicing. Broke my heart. It broke my heart in 1,000 pieces. It broke my heart in 1,000 pieces. I can still barely breathe from it. Right? I mean, pictures of the rally in Sydney, Australia, or in London, right? Rejoicing. Broke my heart. So Homo Amor never rejoices. I want to understand that. Is that clear? Because that's the first point. Homo Amor never rejoices. Right? Homo Amor never rejoices. If I have to go and kill in World War II to defeat Nazism, I don't rejoice. So that's the first point. The second point, and it's related, is that I always recognize that there's a spark of light, a spark of the sacred everywhere, including in Hamas. It's always true. That's why it's tragic. The Hamas are not orcs. So I just want to say that. That's 1 and 2. Okay? 3. Empathos. Homo Amor always feels. So this is the third point. The radical, massive, huge, unimaginable obligation of this moment is to feel everyone. And to feel everyone means that whatever Israel should do or shouldn't do, which I'm leaving off the table for right now, but whatever Israel should do or shouldn't do, or whatever the Allied forces of Europe should or shouldn't have done in World War II when they bombed Germany, right? Which are not precisely analogous, but there's obviously some analogy. But whatever should or shouldn't be done, our hearts have to be ripped apart at any thought that innocent people will be killed. Right? Of course, our hearts need to be ripped apart at any thought that innocent people will be killed. And any notion that says that my heart's not ripped apart can't be held. Now I want to stay close, friends, stay close. Sometimes the people who are closest to the pain are understandably so lost in their own pain that we have to feel for them, right? And that's true. You know, in my colleague Yuval Harari, and those of you who have been with us for a few years know that we've significantly critiqued Yuval's thought, and I think correctly. And, you know, there's an entire series of books, and not Yuval particularly, but Yuval as an expression of postmodernity. Having said that, on this issue, you know, I have real common ground with Yuval. You know, and Yuval understands and wrote about it, about the experience that a person can have that they're so tragically ripped apart by the pain in front of them, they can't feel the other person's pain. So I understand that. And there are people like that, for sure, which we totally understand. And then we have to hold that feeling field, right? We have to feel the pain all across. And we can't allow the drive for vengeance to determine policy. So vengeance can't determine policy. Revenge can't determine policy. Can't be done. Can't be done that way. Can't be done. Right? When we decide how to respond, we have to respond as Homo Amor. Now, Homo Amor, the Allies in World War II who bombed Germany, may have been acting as Homo Amor. Amor may have said that for the sake of the future of humanity, the Nazi and Japanese triumph in World War II will destroy untold generations and trillions of people. Had Nazism triumphed and ruled Europe, and then the technologies that emerged, right, in the future became Nazi technologies and imperial Japanese technologies, right, in the shadow of imperial Japan, none of us would be living in the same world. And so Homo Amor may have needed to bomb Germany at that time. But Homo Amor couldn't do that as an expression of vengeance, but needed to do that as an expression of love. Meaning, I love all of reality, and I love all people, and I love the future. And I actually hear the call of the future. And I actually have to take responsibility for the present and for the future. And the boys who died on the beaches of Normandy, the European and American soldiers, and who died in the Far East, I died in order to allow people to walk around Antwerp today, and to walk around Amsterdam today, and to actually have the potential of a world that's free, in which the rights of women are honored, right? In which all the values that we hold dear in our bodies have a possibility of blooming and flourishing. So that's the first set of points. No one's outside the circle. Even pure evil has a holy spark. Because if you actually get what it means that we live in a cosmo-erotic universe, it means that in every moment, Eros sustains reality. Nothing is sustained without the sacred Eros of reality. So anything that exists has a holy spark. Now, you might think that's insane, right, my friends? That's insane. So let's just think about something. Think about one of the most stunning developments that's ever happened in the world. Let me just give you one example of a stunning development that tells you that no one's outside the circle. What are two of the most, in many ways, beautiful and in many ways moral countries in the world today? Two of the most moral countries in the world today. This is shocking. Germany and Japan. Does everyone get that? Wow. Who just got that? Who just got that? Germany and Japan. Okay, Germany and Japan. In other words, after Germany and Japan were defeated in World War II, the Allies and the Germans and the Japanese engaged in a project of reconstruction, right? And that project of reconstruction changed the world. It changed the world. And Germany and Japan became best friends of reality. They became democracies. And it's one of the most unimaginable transformations that ever took place in world history. Does everyone get that? An unimaginable transformation where Japan as we knew it in 1930 faded from our eyes. Germany as we knew it went through an unimaginable transformation. I just want to get who gets that. So that gives me great hope. It gives me great hope. Who would have thought in 1943, 1944, and I want to say this heart shattered, when 12,000 people were being gassed a day in Auschwitz in 1944 in the concentration camp. Is there anyone in the world who would have thought that we could today in 2023 be talking about a healthy, thriving German democracy with all of its problems? And I'm aware of the the neo-Nazism that exists in strains of Germany, and I'm aware of the challenges. And in Japan, those are all real. Nonetheless, Germany at this moment is a thriving democracy, as is Japan. That's unimaginable. Does everyone get that? If there wasn't a spark of the sacred, that couldn't happen. So I just want to feel that for a moment. Okay? Okay. Let's hold here for a second. Okay. So I want to go to the next step. The next step is hard. Okay? Next step is hard. Right? And I want to say again really clearly, right? Again, to really try and listen carefully, right? Right? And I see Bit Swan, right? If no killing means no killing, how can we justify either side killing? So this is where we got to listen carefully. This is where I just stay carefully, Bit. Just so much respect, honor, love, okay? Stay really close, okay? Stay really close. Would it have been, this was the Dalai Lama's point. This is the Dalai Lama's Homo Amor point, okay? Which is, okay? The Homo Amor point is that America, or the Allies in World War II, needed to kill as Homo Amor with their hearts broken in order to defeat Nazism. I just want to just say that because, again, we have to hear each other. That was the Dalai Lama's point to me in his bedroom, right? So I just want to kind of get that and hold that. Hold that was, now you can disagree with the Dalai Lama, right? Right? But I just want to hold that. Just want to hold that there. Right? Dalai Lama could be wrong on this, okay? And the Allies could have been wrong on this. And it could be we should have allowed Nazism to triumph, right? But I'm going to hold this here. So I'm going to hold this here. But there's certainly a powerful position, which I'm aligned with, okay? I'm aligned with, which says that we should have defeated Nazism, right? So if you ask me, do I think we should have defeated Nazism in World War II? I'm going to be very, very, very clear. Let's just try to find this. I want to making a simple point that we're going to just kind of follow it. It's not so easy to follow the thread. You have to kind of find it inside of you. Should the Allied troops have defeated Nazism? And it's so easy in social media threads to say whatever you want. To me, it's clear that we should have. And that was to the Dalai Lama, it's clear that we should have. And we could both be wrong, okay? We could both be wrong, obviously. And it's obviously not just Marc Gafni and the Dalai Lama's position, obviously, right? That's a position that is understood by many hearts and minds of radical, mad love in the world. But not only that we needed to, but we needed to as Homo Amor. That Homo Amor needed to be tender and fierce and to take responsibility for the future, right? And to actually birth into the world goodness, truth, and beauty, which stood against Nazism. So I want to just try and feel that for a second. I just want to try and feel that. It's like unimaginably important to feel. And at the same time, to literally have my heart absolutely broken in 1,000 pieces as we need to bomb German cities. And I'm going to add something. There's an entire literature. And Elena, you may be familiar or not with this literature. There's entire literature about, did the Allies bomb as necessary in World War II German cities, or did they overbomb in ways that were completely unnecessary? That's a good question. It's a hard question. I haven't mastered that literature. I'm aware of the literature. I've read some of it. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I would need to study it enormously more, and I'm not even sure I could draw a conclusion because I don't know the answer to that question. That's a fair question. And once as the Dalai Lama said, you have an obligation as love to use force because you're taking responsibility for the whole thing, as in defeating Nazism in World War II. Well, how much force should you use? The fact that you have permission to use force doesn't mean that all ethics are off the table. Of course not. And I've got to feel the pain of every innocent man, woman, and child. But I'm saying even more. I'm saying I need to feel the pain even of the people that are not innocent. Do you understand that? They're not orcs. And, oh my God, I have to defeat Nazism. Okay. So when it comes to the next point, and this is a hard one, right? This conversation, not an easy conversation. I wasn't looking forward to it this morning, and I'm madly delighted to be with everybody. It's a hard conversation, but we have to cut through and actually be able to see and feel everyone and everything. I'm going to ask a real question. I'm going to do a couple of thought experiments, but they're utterly necessary to do. Try and do this thought experiment with us in a real way, okay? Because it'll tell you something. And again, let me try and go 4 steps. So 1, moral equivalence means that I can make a distinction. To make a distinction, I have to be in the field of value. If I'm not in the field of value, I can't make a distinction. Now, so moral equivalence, there's no room for moral equivalence. There's room for moral complexity. So let me just understand what that means. So I've shared with many of you that when I was 21, 22 years old, I began in teaching asking the following question. I asked the question the first time at a very famous school in New York, and I've asked it at the best private schools, the best public schools, the best universities around the world, in the Western world particularly. And the question I asked is twofold. 1, if you find yourself on an island with Mother Teresa, you were shipwrecked, and many of you have heard me ask this question. And Mother Teresa turns out to be a bitch. Apologies to Mother Teresa, right? She turns out to be impossible. You're just you and her on the island. You know you're never going to be rescued, and she drives you out of your mind. She drives you crazy. It's like nails on a board. You're there for 10 years. You can barely breathe. She gets injured. You happen to be a doctor. You can easily save her. No one will know if you don't. Do you have an absolute moral obligation to save her? Right? So I asked that question to universities around the world. I asked the question at an academy here in America, and one of the people that really was a leading figure at that academy, I think, is with us today, whose name shall not be said, right? And of course, the answer is yes. And the majority of people, overwhelming majority, meaning above 95%, said you cannot say that there's an absolute moral obligation to save her. The best students at the best schools. Because they say you say it's a nice thing to do, it's a good thing to do, but you can't say it's an intrinsic moral obligation. Because they said they were raised in a postmodern way of thinking, which says that there are no absolute moral obligations. Because what postmodernity says is, and this is why I've argued so fiercely with postmodernity and with my friend Yuval, is that one story of value is not better than any other story of value. And when my friend Yuval says in the second chapter of his book, Sapiens, implies that there's no fundamental difference between Libya at its worst under Gaddafi and a vision of universal human rights, that those are both just stories of value and there's no intrinsic difference between them, then we've stepped out of the field of value. And we've stepped out of the field of value, which is the postmodern understanding that lies deep. Stay close, friends. This is deep and hard. Then I can't actually say that one position is better than another position. So first, I just want to kind of feel that. That's a big deal. That's a huge realization. And so therefore, I'm always going to have a very hard time creating any kind of moral hierarchy. And even the word hierarchy gets me upset. So just feel in your body when I say the word hierarchy and you get upset. He just said hierarchy. Why is he saying hierarchy? Right? But those of you who are with us this summer, we talked about lines and circles as being two qualities of cosmos. And each one has shadow and light. So the circle, the beauty of the circle is that everyone's inside. Does everyone get that? Everyone's inside. No one's outside the circle. And every point in the circle is equidistant from the center. So there's an egalitarianism in the circle. It's not about hierarchy. And the word in Hebrew, igul, means circle. Egalitarian, there's an equality. And we actually recognize there's a spark of light everywhere. And everyone's inside the circle and no one's excluded. And we're all sitting face to face, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. We desperately need the circle. And if I think that when I'm bombing Nazi Germany, I cannot feel the horror of an innocent German baby being killed, then I'm not Homo Amor. But I'm not Homo Amor. Everyone's in the circle. No one's outside the circle. No one. And there's a line. And the line makes distinctions. That's part of what a line does. The shadow of the line is it makes artificial distinctions. Right? So anyone who says artificial distinction, right? I'm black and you're white, so I'm better than you. I'm white and you're black. I'm Sunni and you're Shiite. Right? I'm radical Islam and you're Christian. I'm a Christ believer right now. Anyone who says based on any kind of arbitrary, right, I'm somehow intrinsically better, that's what a line is. Right? So the line discriminates, that's discrimination, that's racism of the worst kind. We'll get to that in a second. The shadow of the line. There's a great shadow to the line, but the line also creates a hierarchy. Right? There's things that are higher and lower on a line. And the line also distinguishes. That's what a line does, it distinguishes. So I need a line and a circle together. Does everyone get that? That's what we talked about in mystery school in the summer of 2023. I need Eros Gamos. I need the line and the circle to make love with each other. I need to, on the one hand, say everyone's inside the circle, and there's a hierarchy. And the hierarchy means that not all decisions are equal, right? Not all decisions are equal. So, for example, the Allies bombing Nazi Germany, killing innocents, is a horror. But that's not morally equal to Nazism, right? It's not based on body count. Morality is not based on body count. That's a very, very important understanding. It's based on what's your intention, right? Is your intention to free the world for value and goodness and truth and beauty? Or is your intention to dominate and control the world and gas 12,000 people a day? Those are not the same. That's a distinction that needs to be made. Meaning I need to be able to live in the field of value. Does everyone get that? So I just want to say, who gets that? Just give me just a check-in, on the chat. Who gets that? This is huge. This is huge, right? Who gets that? Who just gets that, right? Lines and circles and why this matters, right? Lines and circles, lines and circles, lines and circles, just lines and circles, just to feel that. Just to feel that. Now just remember, we said there's a shadow to the line and there's a shadow to the circle. Right? There's a shadow to the line, there's a shadow to the circle. What's the shadow of the line? We said before, to arbitrarily place other people on the other side of the line. So when I place someone else on the other side of the line, I can't feel them anymore. That's the great, horrible shadow of the circle. The horrible shadow of the line. What's the shadow of the circle? I can't make distinctions. I don't know how to make distinctions anymore. Do you get that? Now, just who gets just in their body now? I need to be able to bring line and circle together. And you can see a whole set of chat boxes that are all line and a whole set of chat boxes that are all circle. But it's deep. I got to be able to bring line and circle together. That's Eros Gamos. Right? Okay. Okay, ready to go next step? Let's go next step here. Next step is hard. Okay? Next step is hard. So here we go. Next step is hard. Yes, that's absolutely true, by the way. Right? Angus, the carpet bombing of Dresden, we're not aligned. That's exactly right. There's an entire literature that points out that the carpet bombing of Dresden was bullshit. It wasn't Homo Amor. That's exactly right. The carpet bombing of Dresden was a disaster. And actually, if you've studied it, false information was given to Churchill, the British Prime Minister, right, which was actually falsified, right, by certain people in the British government in order to justify the carpet bombing of Dresden. So the fact that we needed to defeat Nazism as Homo Amor does not give us the right, did not give the Allies the right to do everything or anything. Of course not. Of course, that's really important. Beautiful. Okay, so I think we can feel that. In other words, I can't just become a line making distinction which says Dresden is outside. It's on the other side of the line. No, I need to constantly be making distinctions. In other words, what is the relationship between power and love? Love needs to wield power. That's really important. Now let me go to the next step, okay? Next step. And this is now also addressing an entire series of questions. Have I taken a side here? So yes. I want to be really clear that I have taken a side. I am on the side of life. I'm on the side of life. And I want to ask Krista for a second just to take a moment just to put in a note that Aubrey and I wrote, that we just write the podcast we just published. And then take a second just so we can just kind of read it and feel it together. The side we're on is the side of life. And that's unimaginably important. We have to be on the side of life. Now, to be on the side of life doesn't mean that we don't go to defeat Nazism. I'm not just on the side of life now. To be Homo Amor is to feel the future. Right, brothers and sisters? That's what we've said. Homo Amor takes responsibility for the future and for the past and for the present. So I don't just live in the present. Homo Amor feels the future. So I need to defeat Nazism in order to be able to create a future in which people can walk around Amsterdam or Germany. And we can have the great miracle of the transformation of Germany and Japan, right? So we are taking a side here. But the side we're taking is we are all in for all life. We're all in for all life. And we're at this time between worlds and at a time between stories. And just if we can just read together for a second. We live in a world of outrageous pain. We live in a world of outrageous beauty. We live in a world of outrageous love. And in this time between stories, we step beyond the old stories of good and evil. So that's the first thing. We got to step beyond the old stories of good and evil and their primitive forms. That's step one. So level one is there's old stories of good and evil. Right? And everyone says we're good, they're evil. That's level one. Level two, we step beyond that and we realize it's more complex. Homo Amor holds moral complexity. Right? And by the way, if people want to criticize the Israeli government, criticize the Israeli government. Of course you should. You want to criticize the Belgian government, criticize the Belgian government. That's what a democracy does. And Israel is this insanely gregarious, protesting, conflicted democracy. That's absolutely legitimate. And don't go from moral complexity to moral equivalence. And here, I want to say something that's really, really, really deep, right? And, we speak with a broken heart, with clarity, but always in the unknowing, always in devotion to the mystery. So I want to say something hard here. This is not about terrorism. It's about jihad. And I want you to get the distinction. Terrorism is a method. I'm going to ask everyone just to listen, if you can, just respect everybody. Like so much respect between us. Respect, man, as they say in Jamaica, the Rastas, respect. Respect, man. So I just want to, let's respect the depth and just go slow here. Terrorism and jihad are not the same thing. Terror is a method. Right? And terror can be used by different kinds of people. Jihad is something else. And this you got to really, really understand. What jihad says is, and jihad is Taliban, and jihad is Al-Qaeda, and jihad is ISIS, the Islamic State, right? And jihad is Hezbollah, and jihad is Hamas. And I want to be really clear to my friends, all over the world, whether you're in Antarctica or Australia or South America or Europe. I'm going to be really clear, and this is painful and true, that jihad, in its kind of Sunni expression in Islam, is powerful in the world today. And jihad says, and Hamas is a jihadist organization, jihad says, we spill the blood in active atrocity and war of anyone who doesn't accept the version of Sunni Islam that we accept. It's not jihad is in the interpretation of the jihadists. Jihad is not an internal category. It's not an internal battle. There's a huge amount of moderate Islam that says jihad's an internal battle that takes place within you, which is beautiful. But radical Islam, which is driving the Islamic agenda of jihad, is not just that I have to control Israel, and the words they use is from the river to the sea, meaning there's no room for two states. I want you to be clear. This is not an issue of someone's trying to prevent a Palestinian state. That's not what's happening. If you think that's what's happening, that's not what's happening. There's been 8 distinct opportunities to have a flourishing Palestinian state that many Palestinians, I would say most of the Palestinians, wanted to do. And the jihadist slaughters any Palestinian that wants to make that kind of peace. If you are in Gaza today and you want to make peace with Israel because there's a conflict, because there are 2 competing claims to the same land, which should produce a 2-state solution of peace, the jihadist kills you. Not killing the Jews, kills you. And the jihadist dimension of Sunni Islam, as expressed in the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, as expressed in the Islamic State that beheads soldiers and puts their heads on spikes and civilians, right, which cuts men's cocks off as they rape their women on top of the dead bodies, right, of their friends. That's the jihadist position. And the jihadist says, we're not for life. We are a culture of death. So Hamas says, as much as the West loves life, we love death. That's an almost exact quote. That's jihad. Jihad, you can't negotiate with jihad. Jihad says your very existence, not just, and I want you to stay close, my friends from Europe, my friends from Australia, my friends from the United States, stay close. It's not just an issue of no 2 states in Israel, which has been utterly rejected. Hamas has completely destroyed that possibility. No, it's actually the jihadist agenda is to actually have a world caliphate, caliph, ruler, a world caliphate in which Belgium is ruled by Islamic law. I want to be really clear about that, in which Holland is ruled by Islamic law, in which France is ruled by Islamic law, in which Germany is ruled by Islamic law. And the list goes on. In other words, the jihadist agenda, stated clearly and openly, this is not clearly and openly, is for as long as it takes, we will keep fighting to the death. And if we die, and our children die, and we provoke, right, Gaza being bombed, and we don't let anyone go to the south, we keep everybody in the north, because we want to cause as many innocent deaths as we can, because we're holding our own people hostage. We're going to do that because our agenda is jihad. And jihad means death to the infidel. And the infidel is anyone who doesn't subscribe, right, to my particular vision of Islam. So it's not just that, as the hadith, which is quoted in the Hamas covenant. It's just that the hadith says that in the good time, every stone and every tree will cry out, look, there's a Jew behind me, slaughter them. From the river to the sea, meaning from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, meaning no 2-state solution, only blood massacre. It's not just that. That's just one issue. Israel is a miner's canary. And the canary goes into the mine, You put the canary into the mine to see if the canary will survive, or is the mine poisoned and the canary dies. Israel is the miner's canary for the world. So anyone who thinks who's listening to this call, this is not, it's not about me. I can say whatever I want. This is about some Israel issue. It's the United States. That is not correct. And if anyone wants to read, and I want to recommend, particularly to my friends from Europe, read Douglas Murray, Murray, to really understand where Europe is today and where Europe will be in 20 years from now. And if you really understand what's happening, you understand without a doubt, there's no question, how we respond to Hamas will actually determine, will the massacres that took place in the south of Israel take place in Antwerp and Brussels and Amsterdam? There's very little question about that if you're actually tracking. And I want to ask everyone to read Douglas Murray. That's just one author, but he's looking at this kind of very intelligently. And he's been talking about this for a decade. The support of jihad is very, very, very real and very deep. So we need to be able to respond to jihad. Jihad is a real issue. And I want to get that with everyone. And you know, Homo Amor says no to jihad. Homo Amor is all in for all life. Jihad is a culture of death. Which is why, you know, in the movie Star Wars, they call their battleship the Death Star. Now you have to understand, and if you're a secular nationalist, it's very, very, very hard, right, to understand, right? Which is the purpose of the jihadist is to die. And then I die and I literally go to heaven, and I'm embraced by 70 virgins in one version of it. But actually, this entire world and life in this world is irrelevant. Life in this world is not a value. That is the jihadist position at its core. Life in this world is not a value, right? I die in jihad. I take as many of my people with me, and I ascend to heaven. Now, if you want to say, I don't want to take jihadis seriously, they're lying. Well, they're not lying. This is what they say. This is the open, clear position of ISIS, the Islamic State, of Al-Qaeda, right, of the Taliban, right, of Hamas, of Hezbollah. And this entire group is funded by a number of places. One of them is Iran. There's also vectors of funding from China, and there's vectors of funding from Russia, because it potentially undermines the West. So you've got these strange and terrible alliances. But bracket that for a second. You can't negotiate with jihad. So do we take a side here? We do. We're all in for all life. We're on the side of life. And we're standing against death. Right? And this particular moment with Hamas is a miner's canary moment. Okay, let's hold for a second. Let's just, for a second, I'm going to open the chat box for a second, just to ask, right, do we understand this jihadi idea? Right? And again, there's not one word here which is Marc Gafni unpacking jihad. This is not Marc Gafni unpacking jihad. This is the core of the core. If you don't get the jihadi idea, then you literally have just no clue what's happening here. This is not about terrorism, it's about jihad. Those are two very, very distinct expressions. It's deep. It's painful. It's painful. It's beyond painful. And, okay, here's where it gets like completely insane. And Okay, so the next step. To be all in for all life, I have to stand against jihad, which is a cult of death. Now, someone just wrote in the chat box, right? But jihad's a valid understanding of Islam. And I'm going to ask you let's hold the chat box for a second, Krista, okay? Okay? Right? I'm just gonna hold this. It's deep. So, is jihad a valid understanding of Islam? Yes! But that doesn't make it okay. That's when we say there's no moral equivalence, right? Right? An understanding which allows for the brutal methods of ISIS or Al Qaeda. Again, I'm not even talking about the methods against Israel. I'm talking about the methods against their own daughters and sisters. I mean, you just got to kind of find this in your body. Right? I don't want to say someone's name, but I'm thinking about a good friend of mine who has a fantastic daughter who I did some study with, right? So I'm saying to you, my brother, can you imagine killing your daughter? You can't even imagine it. It's so out of, for the secular Westerner, you can't even imagine. How could you kill your daughter in an honor killing? Because somehow she showed up inappropriately in some way, which betrayed some hint of her sensuality. And you killed her. That's jihad. So I just want to understand this. And I kill her because in this honor killing, right, the name of the family is protected and my place in heaven is protected. So we have to stand for life. We have to stand for life. And for life doesn't mean for the United States. It doesn't mean for Israel. It means for every life. Or for every life that affirms life. For every life that affirms life. But if there's people who affirm death, inflicting brutal death, well, then we have to respond to that. That's what Homo Amor has to do. Homo Amor has to love life. Wow. Okay. So now I want to make one more point. And this is a point that Yuval Harari made correctly. Sam Harris made correctly. I made the point independently, correctly, and dozens of other people have made the point. But it needs to be made here, and I wanna, because it's gotten lost in kind of the chat boxes that refuse to condemn Israel. They refuse to condemn Hamas. And it's this kind of strange moral equivalence. So a group of students at Harvard said, Israel is completely responsible for all the atrocities. Stanford, editor at Teen Vogue, Washington Post columnist, The Guardian, a couple of columnists. Israel is absolutely responsible. Well, that's actually not true. And I want to stay close. Even if you really deeply understand how we got here and the story that brought us to this moment, which I've gone into last week and the week before and on the Aubrey podcast, I'm not going to go into now. If you deeply understand the story, and you understand that there were many, many, many moments for full peace that were utterly rejected by the Hamas jihadist position, and that the huge beauty of the Palestinian nation, right, that came together and became a nation. There was never a Palestinian state, never existed, right? But this notion of kind of the local Arab population that wanted to come together and create right, a state in this place, and the local Jewish population that wanted to create a state, and the conflict between those two populations and how that happened, right? So I've talked about that in depth. But however we got to that place, right? Let's say that you really, really understand. You're not repeating what you read in a chat box or you saw in an article or you read, right? You've really gone deeply and you understand the whole thing, okay? And let's say you think that Israel should have done something different than it did, which is possible. And Israel's been in a very, very complicated and impossible position. What should Israel do? And, Israel's entire left wing, which has been in favor of establishing a state, which I'm aligned with. I think there should be two states. There must be two states. Have been unable to find a partner for peace because the Hamas jihadist element has always destroyed it. But ignore all that. Let's say you think, and don't use words like occupation. What does occupation mean? Who's occupying who? Don't use words like apartheid state. If you know anything about apartheid, Israel's obviously not an apartheid state. Obviously not. Right? So just respect yourself. If you know what apartheid meant in South Africa, and you know that Israeli Arabs serve in the Israeli army, as commanders serve in the Israeli parliament, and that Israel is a flourishing democracy living this tiny state the size of New Jersey or El Salvador, living in impossible conditions. So whatever the critique of Israel is, it's not an apartheid state. So you got to get out of those words. And actually, you're really looking at the situation. And you've got this fierce critique of Israel. Right? So Yuval Harari has a fierce critique of Israel. He completely disagrees with Israel's policy in a thousand ways. Right? Fair. Critique Israel. But don't say that Hamas did what it did because somehow Israel laid siege to Gaza. Israel laid siege to Gaza because Hamas wanted to kill every Jew in the territory. And Israel laid siege to Gaza together with Jordan and Egypt because Hamas was considered a jihadist, destructive of life organization by Egypt, right, by Jordan, and by most major countries in the world that were in touch with Hamas. So Hamas wasn't acting to create a state. Hamas doesn't want a state unless all the Jews are, quote, annihilated, obliterated. It doesn't say the Israelis, it says the Jews. Right? And all of that land are annihilated, a bloodbath. That's what Hamas wants. And then to go on from there to establish an Islamic state all over the world, in every country in the world. That's Hamas's goal. That's what they clearly say. Respect them enough to take them seriously. So what happened on October 7th wasn't because of the Israeli political position. You can agree or disagree with the Israeli political position. You can critique the hell out of it. But it doesn't understand jihad. Jihad is not responding to a particular political position. That completely misunderstands the conversation. That's a secular, Westerner, self-involved, terrible ignorance. The jihadist says, you have to be destroyed. You have to be killed. And I'm willing to die to kill you, and I'm willing for my family to die to kill you. And there's no negotiation. And there's no compromise. And there's no peace. That's the jihadist position. So moral equivalence would say, oh, no, the reason this happened was because Hamas was just engaged in decolonizing. As the teen Vogue editor wrote, this was just decolonization, this utter slaughter. And if Israel would have been willing to agree to some version of peace, it wouldn't have happened. But that's not true. You can't lie. Israel's agreed to 1,000 pieces, at least 8, that have been completely rejected. But even if you think that Israel got it wrong in 1,000 ways, that's not what the jihadist is responding to. You're not understanding jihad. You're not respecting, actually, jihad in a certain kind of strange way. You're imposing your secular, liberal experience of reality on the jihadist, which is a huge, tragic, horrific mistake. The jihadist believes that I go to heaven directly only if I spill the blood, dar el harb, by the sword, through direct attack of non-Sunni Islamists of a particular kind. That's the jihadist belief, not only in Gaza, but in Belgium and in South America, and in Amsterdam and in England. That's the jihadist belief. So you got to really get this. In other words, whatever your critique of Israel is, which you can have, which is a different conversation, which is not the one we're having here, whatever that might be, that's not the cause for jihad. Does everyone get that sentence? It's a big deal. The cause for the now again, I want to be really clear, and I'm gonna do a little critique now of the United States. Okay? I'm gonna do it because the United States deserves critique, and so does Israel. But I'm gonna do a little United States critique here for a moment, right? And a critique of Netanyahu, which is connected. So the United States has engaged in a policy under Barack Obama and under Joe Biden. Biden was Obama's vice president. He ran this policy of basically saying we can work with Iran. We can work with Hamas. They say they're jihadists, but they're really not. We can buy their jihadi beliefs with economic incentives. And so they actually cultivated, right, and encouraged a view which says we can deal with Tehran, we can deal with Hamas, which was a huge mistake. Because you have to take the jihadists seriously. You have to give them the minimal respect, which is they say exactly what they intend. They're being very honest and very straight and very clear. And they've given an enormous amount of evidence for that. And so that's really, really, it's a difficult thing to understand. But it's undeniably correct and being expressed not by people who think Israeli government's right, but people who think the Israeli government's wrong about 1,000 things. Having said that, what caused the slaughter was not an oppressed people rising up against their oppressor. That's not what this is. That's not. Jihad is something of an entirely different nature than a nationalist movement. When you have two competing nationalist movements, two competing claims on land, you can negotiate. You can listen to each other. You can have a conversation because you're in a shared field of value. So when you're in a shared field of value, then you can actually create possibility. But paradoxically, if there's no shared field of value, meaning for the Sunni jihadist, the only field of value is the culture of death, which says, I go to heaven by killing non-Islamists and by establishing a worldwide caliphate so that there's Islamic State, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, Khomeini, control of reality. Well, so that's what people are afraid to say in chat boxes. And this has nothing to do with a legitimate, and here's the next big sentence that people ask so many questions about. This has nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a legitimate conflict that should be able to be resolved if we step out of martyrdom, suicide bombing, and jihad. If there are competing claims to land in a shared field of value, then actually something good can happen. And so I'm going to do another thought experiment, okay? It's the last one. You have to make a choice. You can live, my Belgian friends, my Amsterdam friends, my Argentinian friends, my American friends, you have to make a choice. My friends in the Arab world, across the world, okay? And remember, we're making this huge differentiation. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is legitimate, and you can take different positions on it that are critical and important. That's not jihad. That's a critical distinction. Now stay close. Stay close, stay close, stay close, stay close. Here's the experiment. Every second, I want to do this thought experiment really clearly so we can really feel it. And you got to be honest with yourself. You're like fully crazy honest, okay? You have a choice. You and your family have to choose where you're going to live. You can go and live, let's assume before October 7th. It's before October 7th, it's a year ago, but you really understand you can go and live in Gaza under Hamas, or you can go and live in Tel Aviv in a pluralistic democracy. Where are you going to take your sons and daughters to live? You get it, everybody? So I got to tell you something. I don't honestly believe, if you're being honest, that there's one person on this chat box, one person who's being honest, okay? I don't believe it, right? And I think it's a completely fair question, right? It's this is how you know. Why is it not a fair question, right? In other words, where do you want to live? You have to actually make a decision of what your actual values are, right? What are your values? You got to make a decision where to live. Now, that doesn't mean, let me be really clear, my beloved friend Colleen, that doesn't mean you agree with Israeli policy. You might disagree with Israeli policy completely. But do you understand that? You might decide to go to live in Tel Aviv and protest against the government because you get to do that without being killed there, right? You might decide to go in Tel Aviv, right, and be an activist for a particular position, right? Because your daughters are safe there. So just feel this, okay? Okay? Feel this, okay? So Gaza under Hamas, would you go live there? The answer is you wouldn't. And the reason you wouldn't is because if you disagree with Hamas's policy, you and your daughters and your children will be killed brutally. So those are two different structures or relationships to life, okay? So we gotta feel that. You just got to feel that. Now, again, let's go really careful. Egypt has Gaza under siege. The Arab world, right, doesn't want Hamas in it because the jihadists of Hamas want to actually destroy Egypt the way it's structured now, which is why Egypt closed its border. Now, if you ask me, what should we do today? For example, should we give food and water in the siege? Of course we should. Of course we should. Of course we should. And should we do everything we can to protect innocents? Of course we should. Should Israel invade Gaza now? I don't know. So I don't want to avoid that question. I don't know. I don't have enough valid information to understand, right, exactly what should be done here. It's an impossible question, which breaks my heart 1,000 times. What I can say, now stay close. What I can say is, whatever decision is taken in Tel Aviv, the same decision eventually is going to be taken in Brussels and in London and in Paris and Argentina, right? And around the world. It's one world, it's one globe, it's one heart, it's one love. Okay? Now stay close. 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 Now let's just get this let's try to stay close. Okay? And I think it just give me a yes if this helped you. I feel like I can feel almost everyone with us and getting it, but if this helped you and clarified and open space and this Q&A was worthwhile to you and it touched something in your heart, right? And we can just give me a yes, just so we can feel each other, right? So thank you, right? We can feel each other. It's imperfect. It's imperfect. And I said in the beginning, we have to at this moment lead from certainty and lead from uncertainty. And if I tell you I know everything, don't believe me, I don't. There's deep confusion and my heart's broken. But I want to answer one other question, the last one that was implicit, right, in many things that people asked, okay? Which is the following. What we need to do in order to respond, that is ours to do, is we need to create a field of value. In other words, the jihadist feels that we're the people that take God seriously, we take value seriously, we take honor seriously. Now that it's distorted and wrong, that it's a cult of death, I understand. But they look at the West and they say, right, no one believes anything. No one stands for anything. There's no integrity, there's no honor. Now that's not true. And in order for us to be able to actually stand for life, to be all in for all life, we need to actually generate a new story of value. We need to generate that which we stand for. We need to stand for life with the same passion that the jihadist stands for death. We need to stand for value with the same passion that the jihadist stands for, we would call anti-life or anti-value. And we need to stand for a world in which no one's outside the circle. We need to stand for a world in which everyone actually realizes that they have a unique instrument to play in the Unique Self Symphony, that everyone's feelings matter, that the color of our skin is not what matters is the content of our character, that we love each other in our brokenness, that we heal each other, right, in our pain, that we hold our traumas together, and we hold vision, and that we actually have a story of Homo, Amor. What does it mean that I'm related to the whole? What does it mean that actually I want a new vision of relationship? What does it mean, stay close friends, that I have a new vision of desire? Right? The jihadist has desecrated desire, and particularly desire that lives in the body. And that desecration of desire that lives in the body, and that desecration of life in the form of woman, in the form of the feminine. The feminine stands for life. And that standing for life that is the feminine, right, is desecrated by the jihadist in a fundamental way, which is why sexual abuse and horrific rape and honor killing define the jihadi world in a tragic way. So we need a new narrative of desire. We need a new narrative of relationship. We can't just stand against. Does everyone understand? We have to stand for. It's not just, right, freedom from something. We need freedom for something. We need to stand for a new story of value. And that new story of value has to be more passionate and more powerful and more profound and has to include everyone and has to speak. And that's what happened in the Renaissance. They told a new story of value. They told a new story of love. That's what Homo Amor has to do. And I truly know, and this is the last sentence, I truly know that if we actually tell a new story of value that's rooted in commitment, that's rooted in integrity, that's rooted in honor, that's rooted in nobility. You know, I spoke to a friend of mine this morning from Belgium, And I said, okay, so you and your friends, like, what are you guys up to? They said, well, basically, we want to be entrepreneurs and make a bunch of money and have good vacations. I said, wow, he's a good man, the young man. Really? That's what you're about? That won't work. It's a new world. You got to stand for the world. You got to live in a new story of value in which actually you feel the whole and the whole feels you. You've got to give your unique gift. And you have to feel, here's a big word, obligated, committed to that unique gift. You got to be willing to live for goodness, truth, and beauty with the same but exponentially more passion than the jihadist is willing to die for the sake of Islamic supremacy. But now here's the crazy thing, okay? Now here's the crazy thing, okay? And this is like the most insane thing we're going to say. So it's just the last bit, but here's the thing. When we do that, what I actually believe is when we actually stand for the God field. But the God you don't believe in doesn't exist, right? The real God field, the field of intimacy, the field of value, and the field of goodness, truth, and beauty, the field of Eros, the field of desire. When we stand for that field and we live for that field, and we live beyond ourselves, for ourselves and beyond ourselves, and we stand for the all with radical commitment, radical joy, radical responsibility, radical integrity, that actually arouses respect. And I think that there's actually many young men and women and the Islamic jihads of the world who would actually notice. We actually bring sacred texts. We create new beauty. We create a new world vision, right, of the sacred. That's actually alluring. That's actually attractive. That actually will invite an alternative to the brutalized, degraded story, right, that is jihad. We need, if you will, a jihad for life, a contradiction in terms, a radical commitment to life. You know, and I'll finish with this, I have a young friend that we text every day, a young friend from Belgium. Let me just share with you what we write each other every day. I'll just share with you for a second. We write each other every day. The good is real. I serve the good. I serve no other master. I am powerful and free to serve the good. Baroi, right, for the sake of the all. Right? Amen. Jihad for life. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amen. Jihad for life, my friends. Jihad for life. Cha.